I'm not an Ottawa political reporter. I don't know the machinations of what's going on. I think it's quite likely that you'll see a Canadian presence of some kind. They'll probably shift gears towards training and redevelopment. But I mean, the fact is, it actually doesn't matter. I mean, Canada has 2 or 3% of the NATO coalition forces on the ground right now. That percentage is going to become even lower if the Americans surge in. The Canadians right now are protecting the populated approaches to Kandahar City and Kandahar City itself, while the Americans are doing a lot of the really violent stuff in the more dangerous districts of Kandahar province. I mean, the fact is, whether Canada is there or some other NATO country is there in Kandahar, I mean, what matters is what's going on in the White House right now, not what's going on in Ottawa.
Okay, let me make sure I get everybody in on this. Okay, Colonel Pellerin, any reason to suspect that Canada's position on this is going to change before the 2 years are up?
Oh, I'm convinced that we will not go from 3,000 to 0 troops. I think Graeme mentioned the training of the Afghan army and the police will be the priority of NATO, and we're likely to be there. The development and PRT and security that goes with it. Helicopters are in high demand. So, and plus the support required for that. I think we'll have a robust presence after 2011. I would suggest between 1,000 and 1,500 troops.
Mercedes.
And could I just add?
Yes. Go ahead.
Yeah, just one point. We've been talking about this for almost an hour, and we only talked about Afghanistan. Even John Manley didn't talk about the region, the impact. Some talked about withdrawing from Afghanistan, mission accomplished. But what will be the impact on the region, in particular Pakistan, and we see the neighbor on the left, Iran developing nuclear weapon. Withdrawing too rapidly from Afghanistan would create the vacuum that existed when the Soviets left, and that would have a major impact on the region, I would suggest.
Mercedes, let's, admittedly in the realm of speculation here, McChrystal's made his recommendations for a surge. Let's say President Obama says, okay, we got to do this. We're going to double down and give it one last shot. Could Canada withdraw its troops in 2 years if President Obama then went to whoever the Prime Minister of the day was and said, look, I'm doubling in, you got to help me out here?
Well, it's possible we'll see political pressure from the White House. I think the real issue is not whether or not we're capable of doing it. There was initially an issue with the Army saying, look, we can't do this. They now have allegedly new vehicles coming, and if they get those, they will have the physical capability to do it. Of course, there's still exhaustion with personnel that plays in as a factor. I think the real issue is the political parties, and that I think all three of them at this point see Afghanistan as a political liability, and I don't know if any of them are going to be willing to step up to the plate and be the one who says, yes, we are going to stay in a combat role. Now, just because we stay there as the PRT or as trainers, by the way, doesn't mean we won't see combat, because if you stay as a trainer for the Afghan National Forces, it means you go into combat with them. So that doesn't mean we're going to see an end to Canadian casualties.
Sure. Stephen?
Well, that's exactly right, because that's how they train them. They take them, they accompany the Afghan National Army into combat. That's the way it works. So I wonder, is there going to be a substantial change, a significant change to our mission there, or is it just going to be a branding change that we're going to successfully relabel this as a training and humanitarian mission? But yet we're still going to be doing pretty much the same thing that we were before. I mean, I thought we were out in 2009. I mean, think of what the conversation would be today had we actually left in February 2009, before the election, before all the casualties went up. We would have said, well, we probably made the right decision. But now it's another 2 years, and a lot of things can
happen. A minute and a half, I want to cover two more things. Mark, on that issue of if President Obama asks Canada to stay longer, what should be this government's response?
Well, I think Canada, for the most part, has done its part in southern Afghanistan, and I think it would be entirely reasonable for them to respond to President Obama by saying, we can reconfigure our mission, but our time in Kandahar and deploying a full battle group is perhaps over, and perhaps we should focus on training the Afghan National Army. And not all of those personnel who are involved in training the National Army are mentors in the field. There's also staff needed at the training center in Kabul and elsewhere.
Okay.
So I think there's an important role that Canada can play outside of the large-scale military engagement that it's currently operating.
Understood. I'm going to save 30 seconds for you, Graeme, because you'll know the answer to this question as well as anybody. Do the Afghans like Canada being there?
This is one of the big blind spots of the mission, and you've heard Mr. Pellerin and Mr. Sedra say that we have to reflect the will of the Afghan people by kicking out the Taliban. And I think that if that were the case, there wouldn't be so darn many Taliban. That in fact, a lot of ordinary Afghans do not want us there. And that's one of the huge blind spots of the mission in general, because we rely on these ridiculous polling firms that give us insane results, saying, for instance, that a vast majority of Afghans would turn first to the Afghan police in a time of distress, which is absolutely absurd, And so you end up with a situation where the international community is trying to help the Afghan people without having any idea what the Afghan people really want.
And that's got to be the last word on the program tonight. Can I thank our two guests out of town, Mark Cedra at SIGI in Kitchener-Waterloo, and Colonel Alain Pellerin from the Conference of Defense Associations in the nation's capital. Good of you two to join us on the long tonight.
Pleasure, as always.
Thank you very much. And here in studio, Mercedes Stevenson from iChannel, Graeme Smith from the Globe and Mail, Stephen Staples, the Rideau Institute on International Affairs. My thanks to you three as well.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin was presented by
Vale Inco Limited, a pioneering nickel mining company transforming mineral resources into essential ingredients for everyday life.
Ontario's 33,000 chartered accountants, public policy leaders since 1879. More information is available at casforchange.ca.